So now that we've set up the layout and the background for this platformer example game, we're going to move into setting up the player and the behaviors. In this video, I'm going to combine those two, and in the next video we'll cover the events that are going to make the player actually move in the game itself. There's a lot going on between these three topics here that it could get overwhelming, and I want to break this up so that way we can digest how to get the player sprite working, look at the behaviors that need to be added to these, and then we're going to go ahead and create the events later on. So I'm going to go back to my project, and I need to insert two different sprite objects. Now, why am I going to include two different sprite objects if I just have one player? It comes down to the collision aspect of the actual player itself. Now, they have a little bit of an example here on the documentation. If I go to the player sprite and I scroll down past the layers, we'll cover the layers and we'll fix this a little bit later, but I'm going to scroll down to where it's going to go ahead and talk about the different players themselves. They have this on the second page when we create the behaviors. So they go through creating the sprite itself, and then they'll set up a physical primitive like a box. That's going to be your player. The player itself is the box object, and it's going to move around. It will detect the collisions. It will stand on the platform, jump. But what's happening, this animation in this character here, that's what we're going to translate, and you're going to see in the game is the actual animation happening, but the actual player itself is a physical box, and it's going to be much more precise on the game itself. This is not loading, so let's go and try to reload that page again. Okay. And so what they say here is that their tip here is important that the behavior should be applied to an invisible rectangle object, where it's precise, as you're jumping and moving, that the collisions happening are going to be more precise on that object rather than the actual animation, which the animation has a lot of things going on. What happens if you're in the middle of a jump and you catch an edge, and that collision happening could cause some bad player experience, and that's why they're going to separate these two objects out. So I'm going to go back to construct, and then I'm going to go ahead and right click. I'm going to go ahead and insert a new object, scroll down, and this is going to be a sprite object, and just like the tutorial, I'm going to call this the player box. That's representing that physical box, the player box itself. I'm going to insert. I'm going to put this above the actual layout, select. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and just choose a color. It doesn't matter what color it is, and I'm going to use the paint bucket tool, and I'm going to select where this square is located at, and it's going to fill that in. Now, I'm not going to pay attention to this because this will be hidden or invisible as the game's playing. Now, by default, this is 250 pixels by 250 pixels, much too large. The squares that we were dealing with in our game are 64 by 64. So I'm going to shrink this down to a manageable size, and then we're going to compare it to our player's animation. So I'm going to go up here to the resize tool, and I'm going to change this to 64 by 64, and then I'm going to click on OK. There we have our square is much smaller, and then I'm going to exit out, and then here is our player itself. One thing to note is that currently every object that's a sprite, it has an origin at the center right now. So if I was to try to rotate this, it's going to rotate from the center. That's the origin happening at the center. And as you're rotating your object, you get an angle in degrees on rotation. So I'm going to go ahead and set that back to 0 for a moment. When you're dealing with platformer and you don't want the character to rotate at any time, we can move this origin point to the bottom so that it stays fixed to the lower half. So let's go ahead and do that before we add our animation, but I wanted to cover that and show you that. Why would we do that? And this is why. I don't want my player in the game and then it catches an edge and starts rotating, but that may be for other objects that you may want to have that. So I'm going to put that back to 0 again. I'm going to double click and I'm going to open up this image. Now on the tools on this left hand side at the very bottom, second from the bottom here, the bottom one, that's your collider box there, your polygon collider. Just above it is the origin point or image points. You can actually add different image points. Maybe later on you want a character to hold a sword or a shield or a bow and arrow or something. You can create different image points where you would like different objects to be held. But in this case, we're not dealing with that. But I do want to move this origin point down to the actual foot so that it's clean and it matches the actual animation. So on there's a quick way to do it. I can actually select and change this origin point wherever I want because it's selected over here. But instead of trying to guess where the middle foot is, they have a nice handy tool. On the origin, if I right click, I can go to quick assign, and then I'm just going to go to bottom, and that's going to put that image point right at the middle down there. And then I'm going to exit back out. And now this will also help for positioning. It'll actually pin itself down to the floor with the grid because the grid is set to 64 by 64. I'm now setting my position, and I can set my player kind of into position like so. But for the moment, I'm going to put the player box up here, and then I'm going to right click again, and I'm going to insert new object. This time we're going to go with the sprite again, but this is the player animation, and I'm going to go ahead and write player anim for short. I'm going to insert this sprite, and then I need to set up all the different animations that we can have. Idle, maybe a run animation, a jump or a fall, maybe a death animation. We can go through the process of adding as many different animation states as the asset pack provides us. And let's say you haven't taken a look and looked through those. This is a good time to go ahead and take the look. So I'm going to go up to the folder, and I'm going to look at the asset pack here. And in the PNG folder, I have players, and they have 4 different colors here: blue, green, gray, and red. Now in the tutorial and in my example, they use the blue character, so I'm going to go ahead and stick with that. But if you want to use the green, the gray, or the red, the same process is going to be applied. So I'm going to go into blue, and they have a lot of different animations to choose from. You got a bunch of different walking animation, swimming, switching. You got a death or a dead animation, a duck animation, a fall, and a stand. Since we're going to be setting this up, I'm going to go ahead and put this player stand animation in as the very first one, as an idle. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to upload that. And I'm going to go ahead and get off this so I can remove that image point, and I'm going to zoom in for a moment. And I'm going to have this as the idle state. So if the player is just standing there and not moving, I'm going to have this set of graphics. And I don't want this to be called animation 1, so I can rename this. And I can rename this either by right-clicking and renaming, or I can come down here in the properties. Now, if for some reason you don't see this, and maybe this is not here for you, if you select your animation 1, this should show up. And then I'm going to rename this one to idle, I-D-L-E. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the origin. We changed the origin on the player's box sprite, so I'm going to do the same thing on the animation. That way, later on, we can make sure these two get pinned together and they are set at that origin. So I'm going to go down to the origin tool, And I want to set this to the bottom. So instead of guessing where that bottom middle might be at, is if I go to origin, right click, and I go to quick assign, I can come down to bottom, and now that's set perfectly at the bottom there. Just for a moment, I'm going to take a look at the size of this graphic. This is 45 by 54. That's the actual square here itself, and I'll come back to that in a moment, why that's important. So there is our person, our little character there. Now if I go ahead and zoom in here, and I put these two characters on top of one another, you see how the rectangle, or this square actually, is much larger than the player animation itself. So this is not going to be the right size. That 64 by 64 that I decided to go with originally, it's going to need to be shrunk down to fit a specific area of the player. Now, how much should I shrink this down? I could come in somewhere about the same size as the animation. So if I was to check the animation, check its size, its width is 45 by 54. Let's use those values, 45 by 54. And I'm going to change my size to 45 by 54. And if I grab my little character, put on top, now they match up ideally together. But we have a lot of green here and here and here and here. You can easily catch an edge when you try to jump. So this might not be a good idea. You might want to bring this in together. Some of the dimensions they give you in the tutorial is similar to this size here, but you could catch an edge. And I'm actually going to shrink this down even further so it's much closer to the feet. So if I look at the width here, and let's say I was to go to 40. Oops, wrong character, so we want to back that up. I'm going to select the behind one here, and let's say if I go to 40, bring that on, so we're getting closer. I'm going to go to 30, really shrink this up. So that looks better. Now we're not going to have so much of an edge, but that's still, I need to be a little bit closer. So I'm going to go with 25. And that's much better. It's going to give us a little bit area to work with, and we can always adjust this accordingly later on. So I'm going to move that back away, and then I'm going to select, double click my animation, and I can zoom back in if I need to. Now we're going to need to create the other animations here. So I'm going to right click, add animation, and I'm now given another set of animation in a default state. Let's go ahead and make this the run animation, and then I'm going to need to locate those graphics for the run. So I'm going to click on the folder, and again, they've got quite a bit to work with here. Now they have, it says walk, walk 2, walk 3, walk 4, run or walk, depending on if you want to call it that. I like to call mine run versus walk, but I'm going to use these animations for that. So we have 1. I'm going to select this. I'm going to hold the control or command key, and I'm going to select number 2 and number 3. I'm not going to include number 4 or 5 unless you decide you want to go that far, but I'm going to use 1, 2, and 3. That seems like a lot to work with. So I'm going to upload, and when I do that, I'm now given all 3 of those animations that this character can now go through. 1, 2, and 3. Now what's important to think about is that this player, this animation, has the feet opened up. That's kind of what I would like to be the most, or the width wise there. Now I won't know unless I come outside, so this is going to be frame number 2. So if I exit this for a moment, and with my player's animation, if I scroll down, I can come down to initial animation. I'm going to go to run, and then I need to know, well, what frame? That was frame 2 with the feet. So now the feet are opened up, and And you look here, that dimensions that I provided here on the green box are about the same width as the feet open. So that was a good call on that value there. I'm going to put this back to idle. I'm going to go back into our character, go back to run. The origin was off. The origin is set back to center. Every time you add an animation, the origin gets set back to center. So I'm going to fix that. And the way to fix that is that I'm going to apply to all animations. Now this, I'm sorry, wrong one. Apply to whole animation. Oops, wrong one. You got to go back to idle, sorry. Take a step back. Idle. On origin, I want to apply to all animations. Looks like I'm having a little bit of problems here tonight. So idle. This should be bottom. And then I should apply to all animations. So if I go to run, back there it is. So now we've got it back, set back center. For some reason my idle was off, and now I reset it back to bottom, and now I can then apply to all the animations. Therefore the run now gets the bottom. And a good thing is, it's good to troubleshoot even on the fly like this. Okay. Because we're in a run animation, we need to actually set the properties here. There's a speed value and a looping value. As the player is moving, you want this graphic to continuously run. And the way to verify this, and the way to verify that the speed is a good value, is that you can click on the loop, and on run, if I right click, I can preview this. Oh, something went wrong. That's not good. Save open projects. We're at the restart real quick. And we're back. Sorry about the delay there. Construct was crashing on us, so now we're back. So I'm going to double click back into the animation. And on that run animation, if I right click, I can preview the animation, and it's going to cycle through the animation frames to give me a preview. And based on the look, if you like the speed, you can leave it alone at 5, or if you want to change that, you can do as well. So I'm going to get off that. If you wanted to increment that maybe to 8, and then I go to right click, preview again, the player has a little bit faster movement. I think I'm going to go with the 8 on that. And then now we need to get a jump. So I'm going to go ahead and right click, add animation. I'm going to rename this one to jump. I'm going to go to the folder. I'm going to locate the project into PNG, into players, back into blue. And there is a jump. Which one should be the jump animation? We could go with the player with the feet open. That can be a jump. So they have this as up. So there's up 1 and up 2 and then up 3. That would be considered for jump. I don't think that I want to go to all 3 of those, but I will go with 1 and 2 here because the character, it looks like the eyes are facing in the up direction. So I'm going to grab those 2 for my jump. So 1 and then 2. So jump, feet closed, then feet open. I need to set the origin so that it's at the bottom. Now we had a little issue last time, so what I could do is I could just come right to origin here, right click, quick assign, and go to bottom, and then I could go to the second one, right click, quick assign, and to bottom as well. Now because there are 2 frames, if the player is in a jumping animation, you could loop this, and that way the feet are open, close as it's jumping. But because most jumps will happen when the feet close and then open, I'm going to leave it in that state. So I'm not going to loop on there. And then in the tutorial, they have a fall animation as well. And here is the fall with the player facing downwards. So I'm going to pick that one there. I'm also going to change the origin to bottom as well. So that's going to go through and set up the different animation: idle, run, jump, and fall. Now, one thing to think about is that this character has its eyes facing in the right direction, left or right. Construct works in that everything going in the right direction is positive, and if you go in the left direction, then the numbers start to go down negative. So this character is already facing in the right direction. If for some reason you have some graphics where the character has its eyes facing the left direction, I would recommend just to flip the character so the eyes are going to face in the right direction. It'll be a little bit better to handle in the event system later on. And so that is all of our animations set up for our player. We also have our player character itself. And in the next video, we'll cover setting up the behaviors along with the events to make the player move, jump, and run with the animation. Thanks for watching.